Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of Global Paul's Rethink the Future, a podcast that deals with our consumerist way of life so as to rethink our actions in light of what is essentially open to us now. So in today's episode, we're going to be looking at our way of life again, but in a little bit more detail. And the reason why is because when you're dealing with change and you're dealing with the nature of change that we're really focusing on, which is a different way of giving and receiving, then you have to look at the inertia that's been built up in our civilization and try to understand why that's the case. So that's essentially what we're going to be focusing on today. So what does it mean to live a market-orientated way of life or to be a market-orientated being? So what does it mean to be orientated here? So what are we orientated towards other than an exchange? And what is the exchange that we're orientated towards? So you would say, well, it's just any kind of good or service that you buy. But let's just think about that for a tick. So, because that's not the case. Because as we've said prior, that every interpersonal exchange that you enter into is underwritten by the preeminent good of your time. So in actual fact, the want satisfaction that you have of consuming anything or consuming or satisfying your wants is always secondary or subordinate to the preeminent good of your time. So those interpersonal exchanges become intrapersonal or exchange with yourself because you're always looking at, that givenness of your time is something that is not questioned. It's the preeminent good that you're focused on. You're focused on securing that for yourself. That's why lifestyle kind of comes to predominate. And, that is obviously the lifestyle that you emulate is predicated on how much you earn. And so therefore the models that comes to mediate your preoccupation is ultimately determined by maybe your cohort as far as your earning goes, or if it's aspirational, then you're looking just at the signs of the things that you can buy that somehow kind of represent the transcendence that you're focused on. So the nature of the orientation here is just orientating ourselves towards our time. Okay, so our time is, but the nature of the way how we've set out for ourselves is that time equals money. And so we've made and we economise time. So time is made into a thing as much as a thing that is removed from ourself. And so the way how it's removed from ourself is obviously through money because money equals time here. So the orientation towards your time, that when it's mediated through money, very much ensures that your time, the time to experience your temporality, is as a supplement. So what I mean when I say that? Well, this means to say a weekend or whenever it's called the disutility of labour, I think, to put it in such economic terms. But it just means to say that it becomes an economic good. All right. So when you think of the market for your time, where is that? Where is the market for your time? Now, when you think of what that actually means, and this is when we're dealing with the nature of the impasse, this is actually critical to think of why change is very difficult, because there is no place when it comes to the market for your time, because you live it, and yet we've created a world where we experience our temporality as an economic good, or our time as an economic good, because we have to secure it, because we have to secure it, so we have to work in order to secure it. So the nature of what comes into play here is that the orientation towards the market for our time is utopian. There's no place for it. So it's idealised. So we've fetishized time into such a degree where we feel that time animates our action in such a way because we've idealised it and removed it from our temporality, literally removed it from where we are. And so this is the whole issue when it comes to dealing with the impasse. We have to look at the nature of why it is very difficult. Why is it we've got this cultural inertia? And it's because this utopian, the utopian nature of the market as such, when it's focused on the preeminent good that we're focused on is our time. And so if you think of what utopia is, you look at the Greek root of what it means no place. If you think of the common understanding of it, it's just an idealised place that's removed from society. But if you think about that, all right, so that's for society at large, is the utopia. But what is the vision that you hold out for yourself, then your own little private little utopia? So if you're focused on securing for yourself the good life, is that good life not in itself utopian in the sense that you're removing yourself from the drudgery of making a living? Now, if that's the case, and we're beholden to this thing, then you can understand the nature of why things are difficult to change in our world, because everything is externalized for that preeminent good, for that utopia. Okay, so what is externalized? So you can think of, we think of what is subordinate to the preeminent good of our time. So the thing that you actually buy, so your want in and of itself is secondary. So the good is secondary. The person that serves you is secondary. Community is secondary because it's a supplement. The earth is secondary because all the factors of production that goes in towards making the actual good itself that you buy, but you are orientated towards your time, is also secondary. So you, in the scenario that we're talking about, that you've externalized for the sake of utopia, it makes it very difficult for you to even see the externalities that build up as a result of our activity. So why is it that we're grappling with ecological destruction? Why is it that we externalise human relations to such a degree that we can't even realise that that's the actual spiritual issue? That's the spiritual poverty that creates the grounds of consumerism that we are very much beholden to. So you have this whole thing. And so if you think of the nature of, if there is no place when it comes to your time, like literally there is no place. Now, why is that the case? If you think that when it comes to your time, you are external from kind of where you are. So what does that mean? Well, if you think that you are always preoccupied with an idealised self, as it were, so the underwriting of the where you are always has a vision that you're trying to emulate for yourself, or the realisation of your life, then you're never truly present, okay? You're never truly present. Because why? Because lifestyle as a good is the preeminent model. It is a good that is not questioned, as just accepted as a given. And so your lot in life is to aspire to the realisation of yourself. So the disease of the way of life is not even considered in this regard. Your focus is on realising yourself as a self, but then passing over where you can make an exception that would orientate, obviously, our world in a completely different way of life, but we're not dealing with that now. So you're just looking at the way how you can secure your temporality in order to realise yourself. So you pass over where you make an exception, you take that as a given. Okay, you take that as a given. So in the scenario of an exchange, you can never truly be present, because that time that underwrites it is always removed, because that time is the supplement that you reserve for yourself to realise yourself. So how can that not be the case? Because if you are truly present and you gave no thought to the future, then you would act contra to what you do now. This is the whole issue about it. You wouldn't have a scarcity mindset that persists, the want of a self in this regard, the want of a self which is just nothing other than the want of creativity that you pass over, that you are trying to emulate the sovereignty for yourself to create, but because you pass over the exception, you're only orientating yourself towards a model of the good life that's mediated through your preoccupation, rather than look at the way how you can animate creativity that addresses the spiritual disease that you accept as a given when you accept your time as being the preeminent good. So when we do that, so we are very utopian in our orientation, you're externalising other people. So people become ghosts. We become specters to each other. We become spectral in the sense that you're not truly there because you're always seeing through another person. Like I said, this is not with intentionality on your part when you're entering into an exchange, because your time is a preeminent good. You're never aware to the degree that you are when you can reflect on it when you are entering into what would be considered to be an interpersonal exchange. It's accepted as a given. Because it's accepted as a given, you don't give it due consideration. Because you don't give it due consideration, you don't realise how that you're always never, that person can never. You get flashes, they might appear because that's when the person becomes to the fore. So where they as an actual person manifest themselves in a way where they remove themselves from their role to service, your wants in that regards. So, but it not to the degree where you in yourself can ground yourself, just like another person can do so, because you're not removing because of the nature of the way how you understand your temporality. So, in the scenario of us orientating ourselves towards the preeminent good of our time, externalizing relations, hence subordinating people, so therefore we all become specters to each other. And so therefore the whole nature of the agency that you have is curtailed or dramatically reduced in its creative scope, because it's reduced into buying and selling. It's not reduced, it's not temporalized into animating creation or animating the grounds of the world, because you're preoccupied with a lifestyle obsession rather than looking at something that flies in the face of conventional wisdom. So in the scenario of the externalities, you think of, because you accept what the world as a given, the constituted power that mediates the preoccupation. So that's ultimately the power that is removed, that to a certain degree has rights, that mediates on your behalf, your rights. And what are those rights other than the rights that you have to secure the vision for yourself? This is the whole point about it. It's nothing else other than that. All right. So the thing about it is, if you animate it contra to that, it's got nothing to do with any rights in the way how we understand rights as far as political rights or anything else like that. It's completely removed from that whole orbit of because it's completely removed from the economy as such. It's completely removed from our understanding of politics. It's completely removed from our understanding of identity. It's completely different. It's completely removed, because what you're introducing is that you're introducing art, the way of life that's artful. Because what you have to consider is that we have created ourselves, if we are consumers, then ultimately we are commodities. And if we are commodities, then the orientation is nothing other than orientating our consciousness. Now, we at the moment are orientating ourselves towards an exchange is just accepting the fact that our agency has been reduced into buying. That's what the orientation of consciousness that basically business, when they engage in marketing, advertising and branding, is totally focused on. So the nature of the orientation is always towards the second to things that are subordinate. All right, this is the whole nature of why, when you're looking at buying with one's values, it never addresses the underlying issue or cause, because when they're orientating yourself towards by utilising, say, values in the market in order to differentiate themselves, in order for them to align with your values, so that you're aligning your purchasing with your values, they're not addressing you as a person in the scenario that you've got the full scope of your creativity or your agency that's essentially just latent. And because of the nature of the orientation, the market doesn't exist. The market is nothing else than the orientation towards the exchange. but the exchange is where the exception can be made. This is why I always keep on saying that a whole civilization can be reduced down into the potential of what occurs within an exchange. It is so simple to change it. It's not funny. It's just so simple. So the thing about it is that there's nothing exists outside the orientation. So the orientation of consciousness. So when you're looking at the way how you could potentially potentialize people, it ultimately has to do with potentializing people's time, because that's the preeminent good that we're focused on. And that's the reason why I covered that off in the last couple of episodes, that relates to the exceptions that business can make, and ultimately as both consumer in inverted commas and a producer can make, because then it's looking at the preeminent good that we accept as a given that ultimately obscures the potential or the possibility that's latent for our action to enable our action beyond the holding pattern that we accept for ourselves. So when you have externalized people, the signs of life, this is why it's so difficult, because our culture becomes dead. All right, so like we talked, that you have to animate. So any revolution, any kind of renaissance in human culture has to be done incrementally. It has to be done because it's dead, because it's idealized. And if you think, so we are orientated towards an exchange, we're orientated towards the preeminent good of our time, and it's a market that has no place. All right, so therefore it doesn't exist. So it's inherently utopian. We're mediated with models that approximate sovereignty, but the model of sovereignty is very much a simulation. It can never constitute true sovereignty in the sense of animating creativity, of animating creation. If your model is focused on the sovereign, well, the sovereign is the one that is maybe removed, has constituted power in the sense that they have a position, right? But that position is removed. It is removed in the sense that there is nothing that a sovereign in the scenario of where they are would animate beyond securing the position. Okay, this is the whole point about it. So what is wealth other than just ensuring your position? Right, but that position in and of itself is contingent upon the fact it only exists because it's idealized, it's been removed. So when you're focused on orientating yourself towards a model that approximates sovereignty, the sovereignty is a simulation. It's an approximation. It can never be truly representative of what it is, because it ultimately does not animate its own redundancy. Okay, this is the whole nature of it. It's the animation of redundancy is essentially what creativity is. It's about the dynamic nature of creativity means to say that any position is always surpassed. So when you're focused on what is wealth other than trying to preserve itself. Once wealth is obtained, it's about trying to preserve it in a way to maintain the power, that it has, and that power is nothing else other than a leverage that it can be utilised to have leverage over other people's temporality and the way how that they experience ourselves in that regards. So if you're looking at the way how you can surpass that scenario, then if you're orientated towards emulating that sovereignty, then you are very much running into the impasse, and you'll very much perpetuate a way of life that is just a holding pattern, because you're not looking at animating the world or creating the world by making an exception to the orientation that you always have been focused on, or that we could say within the market, as far as our consciousness and the way how our consciousness is where it internalises the externality of advertising and marketing and the nature of the mediation and what constitutes the good life, our way of doing things, what is business and the way how business does it as a model, other than basically just something, it's an orientation towards doing things. What is our culture in that regards, which I would kind of... I'm not sure whether or not we actually have a culture, because it's not dynamic in the sense that it's idealised. We're not grounding ourselves in a way where we're animating creativity, where we're animating an artful way of doing things beyond the commodity production, and where ultimately people are, coming from a heart-centered kind of space rather than being preoccupied with securing their temporality, and so looking at it from the aspect of money. So this is the nature of what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the inertia. So when you think about, let's kind of recap. So the market doesn't exist outside the orientation towards an exchange, which in and of itself, because we are preoccupied with our time, it doesn't exist anywhere. So it's ultimately utopian. Because we are orientated towards our time, we externalise human relations to the degree where we become ghosts to each other. And so as a result of that, because we accept our time equals money, we don't pass over the agency that we could have to animate ourselves. And so all we're doing, or animate the grounds of creating a new way of life. And so we're very much focused on just trying to breathe life into the ossified remains of ourselves when we accept our time as money. Okay, so what our focus is on is nothing else other than trying to give us life. And ultimately, if you look at the way how visibility is modelled or comes to predominate as a good, you can understand why that's the case, because we are specters to ourself. We hardly exist. And so therefore, in order to exist, one has to appear. One has to appear in that publicness. And so therefore, the signs of life is nothing else other than looking for the signs of a transcendence. We're talking about the average here if we're looking at the way how wealth comes to embody that transcendence. So then you look for the signs of one's wealth through what one buys. And there you have the vicious circle of consumerism that relates to aspirational branding and relates to the vacuousness of consumerism that's very much spiritual in nature. And it's got nothing to do with just securing the necessities. So when if that is our way, then because everything is subordinate to your time, everything becomes extraordinarily difficult to actually address any of the issues that plagues modern life, because we're not looking at it primarily from the aspect that we can create the grounds of a new earth, as it were, and a new way of life where things are done artfully or given, coming back to the way how things are given and received. So I just thought that would probably be, we haven't touched upon it to the degree that I feel that we have. So, so hopefully that was kind of you got something out of it. So until next time, take care anyway.